Welcome everybody. It's a real honor to have you here with us today. And I have the pleasure today of introducing my colleague and my friend, Professor Jim Basker. But before I do, I just want to give you a little bit of history that led us to Oxford Academia that I think might be helpful. I should start by the next slide, which I think will show my parents, mom and dad. They founded Putney 70 years ago. And it's actually, when I leave this webinar, I'm going up to join my wife and family celebrating my mother, who you see on your left's 90th birthday. But she's still alive and well and really cares about this organization deeply. The only reason I'm telling you all of this is they had programs at Cambridge and Oxford long before Jim and I were able to write well, certainly, and probably read. And really, their philosophy was simple. My dad was a World War II veteran of that generation who in fighting Hitler, was drafted when he was 17 years old. So very much colored by his experience of 4 years of trying to save the free world, helped to do so. My mom, who's Dutch and grew up in occupied Holland, was very much colored by the war too, in the respect that, although she's not Jewish, she would be playing with her Jewish friends in the streets in occupied Holland. They'd be gone the next day, and she'd never see them again. So I'm only telling you all this because they were high school teachers, educators in the United States who had what was a pretty crazy idea 70 years ago. Let's take students and put them in environments like Oxford, like Cambridge, in community service, language programs, homestays, off the beaten track, traveling around the world. And in doing that with high school, middle school age students, which was unusual then, will help build world peace, understanding, and a better education system than we have right now. So that's really the spirit of the programs, is bringing students together, challenging them, changing their lives by really introducing them experiences that they would never otherwise have. So the short version of Oxford Academia is that we really, about 30 years ago, I would say, had many, many programs at Oxford and Cambridge. And our friend, Professor James Basker, then founded something called Oxbridge. And I just want to tell you a little bit about him and why we're so excited that he's directing this program, helping us to lead this program, and collaborating with Putney, why it's sort of a perfect marriage. After graduating from Harvard, Professor Basker got his master's at Cambridge and his doctorate at Pembroke College, where our program will be, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, by the way. He's taught at Harvard, he's taught at Cambridge, and for over 30 years at Barnard College and Columbia University, where he still is the Richard Gelder Professor of Literary History. And he's president of the Lehrman Institute, which supports civic and history education, which we all know is more important than ever, it appears from events over the last several months, to over 28,000 schools around the world. He's directed and taught seminars at Oxford for over 30 years. And just to tell you the short story from our perspective at Putney and why this is such an exciting collaboration. As I mentioned, my parents had great programs at Oxford and Cambridge in all kinds of ways. When Jim founded Oxbridge many years ago, after about 3 or 4 years, we really started not only to notice the program, but hear about it from our alumni and alumni families. And they would say to us, tell us, how is your program different and maybe better than what Professor Basker is doing? And we could not look them in the eye and say, it's better for these reasons. Why? The reason's simple. Professor Basker not only is an incredible teacher himself, incredibly engaging, cares deeply about educating high school, middle school students, but because of his association as Rhodes Scholar at Pembroke, he has contacts with the team there, the Oxford family, the Pembroke family, that no one else, I believe, has in the way that he does. And he was therefore able to engage a level of mentorship, teaching, professors, and professionals in their fields associated with Oxford and Cambridge and other schools that we just could not touch. So what did we do? we basically discontinued our program and we said, let's let Professor Basker do this one. The only thing we kept was a journalism program at Oxford that we ran, a much smaller program with the New York Times Student Journeys that we operated for many years. So all I can say is why we're so excited about this summer at Oxford Academia is we find in talking to parents that you all have been zoomed out, you've been isolated, you've been anxious, you've been uncertain, you've lived through this pandemic, and it really has affected not only your academic growth, but your personal growth. To take Jim's contacts and people and bring that magic to Oxford this summer, we think is more important than ever. So not only are you going to hear from him now, know that he's an incredible person, an incredible professor, incredibly well-respected and inspiring. He's been at this for almost 40 years at Oxford, and we're really excited to be bringing him back. From my perspective, the best news is I think he's going to let me come over and be a guest lecturer. I've been at Putney all of my working life, except for my community service was to serve as 3 terms as Vermont's governor, which was a great privilege. I didn't run for a 4th. I wanted to come back here and change students' lives when I was done trying to change some things in public policy. But he said that I can go over there and do some lecturing too. When I'm not here, I do some teaching at the Kennedy School, and I'm a fellow at the School of Public Health at Harvard. So I won't be up to Professor Basker's caliber, but I think he'll let me do a few things there as well. So I'm looking forward to it. I give you my friend, Jim Basker.
Peter, that's unbelievably kind and of course, excessively generous, but thank you. And I want to say immediately how proud I am and grateful to be partners with Putney in this new program, which I'm very excited to do. I've known about Putney for many years and had enormous respect for all the programs and the terrific history of the people there. So now to be immersed in this team is a lot of fun for me and really gratifying. Since we're telling parent stories, I'll just say that like you, Peter, my parents are World War II. They're both long dead, but both shaped by World War II. My mother, a school teacher, was finishing her training in New York City in 1945 when my father, who was a college dropout, but had been fighting in the war for 3 years all over the world aboard a ship, docked in New York and met my mother on a blind date. So without World War II and the way it shaped everyone's lives in that generation, I would not exist. I'm delighted to be here with the people on this meeting to talk a little about this new program, to give it an overview, and of course at the end to answer questions that people will have. As Peter said, I'm an educator. I've been teaching in college and with high school students for 40 years, and I love teaching. I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do in Oxford. And first, of course, is to give you a sense of the setting. On the right, you have an image of Pembroke College. That's actually Chapel Quad. And you see an example of some of the Gothic architecture from the 1840s that characterizes that quadrangle. Our students will be resident, both high school and middle school students will be resident in rooms in Pembroke College. Many of you will understand, but some may not know that Oxford University has a different style of campus. It's made up of colleges, individual colleges, about 38 of them. So we'll be occupying Pembroke, but one of our near neighbors will be across the street, Christ Church, which you see on the left, and is typical of some of the spectacular architecture and profound history that lives in every building, in every street throughout Oxford, which is one of the most magical places in the world. That quadrangle of Christ Church is the main quad, the one that Cardinal Wolsey carved out in the 1520s. And the tower above the gate is Tom Tower, designed by Christopher Wren, who was originally a mathematics don in Oxford before the Great Fire of London created a need for architects. He had been branching out into architecture, but he eventually went to London to build most of the churches after the Great Fire of London. Through the archway, you can see Pembroke across the street. So you can get a sense of how the colleges are near to each other, but completely separate institutions. If we go to the next slide, I want to show you a little bit more of Oxford and talk about some of its history, because as a setting, there couldn't be any place more astonishing. Oxford has a history that goes back really to the 7th century, when the first Christian monastery was established there, near a place where Anglo-Saxons would ford their cattle across the river, and therefore Oxen Ford became the name of the place. But it really took off when the Normans arrived in England. Famously, they came to London in 1066, but by 1071, they built a castle in Oxford, some remnants of which still stand, and we'll visit that castle. 1071. So we're coming up on 1,000 years of history. I mentioned these colleges, which are founded at intervals from the 1200s all the way down to the 21st century. Each of them has its own history and identity. Each is quite unique. Here we're looking at one of the most unusual of Oxford colleges. It's deeply historic. It was founded in the 1440s, so it was already a couple of hundred years old before New England colonists began to arrive in America. But this college is unusual because it has no students. This is All Souls College, which is today a kind of think tank. It has junior and senior scholars elected, the junior scholars by competition, the senior scholars by honor, and their whole job is to write books and do research. Occasionally they do a bit of teaching, but there are absolutely no undergraduates in that college whatsoever. So it's an amazing institution, and it sits right in the heart of Oxford. It's typical of the kinds of institutions that we're going to try to introduce our students to in the course of the program. We'll be based in Pembroke College, but we're going to take advantage of all of the historic sites and other institutions across the university. I think if we jump to the next slide, we'll see a basic overview here. And I want to pause on these two slides. Oxford Academia is going to have both high school courses and middle school classes. The students will all live in the college, but they'll live in separate staircases and separate sections of the college, and they'll have their own individual courses. You can see on the slide the dates of the program. The basic organization is 2 two-week sessions, and students can enroll either in either of the 2-week sessions or in both together. And be there for 4 weeks. So there are a lot of choices in terms of timing and the way to splice the experience together. The slide on the left, the photograph on the left emphasizes one of the aspects of these programs that I believe in very deeply, and that is students learn best by doing. So none of our courses, about which I'll say more in a minute, is about sitting and just listening to someone lecture at you or drone on. All of our courses are interactive and experiential. A student like the one you see who's writing, a student in a writing course will write every day. Will probably write multiple times, but also will write in multiple locations, different places. On the right, you'll see an aspect of student life that I think is really important. That's the dining hall of Pembroke College, as seen from the high table looking down towards the entrance. Those are the seats where during the year undergraduates and graduate students take their meals, and where in the summer our students will take their meals. You can see the kind of traditional architecture of this dining hall. But what I want to point out especially are the portraits, because these institutions are so inscribed with the history, and especially the history of the important people, the people who contributed to the intellectual and cultural life and creativity of these places. This dining hall has portraits of King Charles I, who lost his head, of course, in the 17th century, but was King of England when this college was founded in 1624. If we think about that, it's only middle-aged by Oxford standards. There were other colleges around 400 years before that. It has been around for almost 400 years now. But also in that dining hall are other important figures in the history of the college. My favorite is Sir Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister, the famous athlete who broke the 4-minute barrier in the mile. He actually did so in Oxford, but his portrait doesn't hang there because he broke the 4-minute mile marker. He later went on to become an eminent neurologist a doctor who did important work in neurology, and joined the Oxford faculty and was named Master of Pembroke College because of his preeminence as a neurologist. So appropriately, Pembroke honors him as a great scholar, a great medic, and as master of the college, and not because he was a distinguished athlete. That gives you a sense of the ambiance in the college. I think we should move to the next image or two. Here, we have a chance to see the variety of the curriculum. And I want to say a few things about the course offerings. Some of you on this call today have studied the classes. Maybe some of you are seeing this list for the first time. I want to encourage the students, especially on the call, to look at that list and think about the subject that really draws them, that really attracts their imagination. So in the curriculum, we're trying to offer courses that by and large, students cannot experience in the same way in their high school. Many of these are subjects that simply aren't there, whether medicine or law or criminology. Others of them, like creative writing or journalism, might be possible, but they're not going to be taught in school the same way that we're able to do them in a setting like Pembroke College, Oxford. It's important also to note that students can take any two of these courses, one as a major seminar and one as a minor seminar. And we can talk about that, but basically the major seminar will be 3 hours of work in the morning, although it won't be all in the classroom. It'll be variegated in half-hour units. There will be time in the classroom, time out of the classroom. Some classes will be out and on historic sites or museum visits or walking tours or project exercises, more time than they are in the classroom. But the majors will be in the morning, and then in the afternoon from 1 to 3, a shorter time devoted to a second subject that we call a minor seminar. Very important for the students to know and to notice. They can combine any two courses. So no one is pigeonholed as a science student or as a humanities student. One could major in medicine and take a writing course as a minor. One could major in Shakespeare and take archaeology as a minor. Any two. Each student gets to create his or her own unique curriculum here to pursue the interests that appeal to them. And they can be completely experimental. There's no expectation of a background in any of these subjects. Indeed, for these, most of these are to open new horizons to students. And when you think about the way these courses are taught, it's important to think about them in terms of the experiential learning and the creative approaches that teachers take. So I mentioned creative writing. People in that class will write every day, but they also may be writing on different historic sites around the town or in the face of important paintings or particular statues or particular historic sites where an event occurred, such as the English Civil War. The medicine classes, both molecular medicine and the introduction to medicine, will be taught by faculty who are themselves either faculty in a medical school or researchers in the Oxford Medical School. So they'll be introducing students to the actuality of the profession and of the fields of science that make up that subject. And they'll get hands-on introductions, both in conversation with practitioners and in exercises that introduce them to subfields and encourage them to become masters of them. Let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the middle school curriculum, but also about what I was mentioning in terms of experiential learning. Here you see the subjects that are on offer for the middle school students, who I mentioned will be living in the same college and using the same dining hall, but will be living in separate staircases with their own residential supervisors and not commingled with the high school kids. But we believe that kids this age can really have a transformative experience, both in terms of living abroad, being in a college environment, but having access to subjects like this. The image you see of a teacher with students in front of a painting exemplifies this experiential approach to learning and the ways that we'll be using important institutions and resources in Oxford. So the Ashmolean Museum, for example, which has very important collections in art, in classical materials, in just about every genre, is actually the oldest museum in the United Kingdom, and it is right in the heart of Oxford. So it affords materials where students can be in front of important paintings from every period of European and indeed other cultures' histories. It's important to think about how we're going to use them as well. Teachers might present for a moment or two about particular paintings, but then students will have an assignment, if they're doing something in creative writing or journalism or a subject like that, where they're assigned to pick out a painting that speaks to them and then sit down and write perhaps a short story or an article in response to that painting rather than doing an art history piece. Other institutions in Oxford that will be part of what we experience, the Bodleian Library, which dates from 1603, and we're going to have a private visit to that extraordinary library, one of the greatest archives in all of the world, and a powerful architectural as well as institutional presence. We'll be visiting and doing different workshops in the Oxford Castle, which, as I mentioned, is a Norman castle from 1071. People forget that it's there largely because for a time in the early 20th century, it was actually a British prison, and you couldn't visit the castle because it was walled off to contain dangerous criminals. But it has for the last 20 years been open, converted to shops and a hotel and pizza and coffee houses, and of course, some remnants of the castle which are still available. It's such an historic place. Richard the Lionhearted, for example, was born in the Oxford Castle. King John of Magna Carta fame was actually besieged in the Oxford Castle. So the place just reeks of history going back almost 1,000 years. We're also going to take advantage of the Pitt Rivers Museum, which has all kinds of paleontology and other displays for scientists. We're going to have a private visit to Rhodes House, which is the global headquarters of the Rhodes Scholarships and a vibrant cultural center in the Oxford setting. We've had a private invitation as well to visit the Rothermere American Institute. Will be enjoyable to get a British and European perspective on American history on our visit there. We will have a private visit to St. Mary's, the University Church, which dates from the 1200s, is in the center of Oxford, and famously is a place where, until the Sheldonian Amphitheater was created, all of the graduations and all the ceremonies in Oxford took place. But at other times, St. Mary's Church was anything but religious in its orientation. During the Reformation, in fact, in the fights between Catholics and Protestants, which became very bloody in the 1500s, there were actually, during a time of tyrannical rule, there were Protestant martyrs who were imprisoned overnight in that church and taken out the next day and burned at the stake in Broad Street, right in front of Balliol College. Students will see those sites as well. All of them to be used in creative ways and not just as tourists visiting the city. Can we move to the faculty? Because I'd like really to focus for a minute here. And those of you who know me from earlier programs or from any of my other institutional settings know that my deepest faith in education is that the most important work is to bring the right students together and then to put in front of them the most passionate and knowledgeable faculty that one can find. I am enormously proud of the people you will see here and others you will hear about who teach these courses. And that's why I want to dwell on who they are for a minute, because one of the things that students think I don't believe could get anywhere is the experience of being in a classroom, in a close seminar, a small group working with people like these. So Predrag, our senior medical professor on the left, is actually a professor of medicine at the St. Andrews Medical School in Scotland. He's been training British physicians for 20 years or more. He comes and loves to teach high school and middle school students in the summer. He's a kind and generous man. He's actually just sent his own teenage son off to university, and he loves working with kids this age. But the wonderful thing is that when students are working with him, they are actually working with someone who trains physicians who are currently in hospitals all over the United Kingdom. On the right is Marcia Wallace, who's an American originally, trained PhD at Cornell. She's a very accomplished, even prize-winning geneticist who has been a research fellow at the Radcliffe Hospital for at least 7 or 8 years, and has taught with us for all programs I'm involved with all of that time. Marcia does cutting-edge research. She's involved, for example, in projects working on cancer and diabetes using the CRISPR technology, which does the genetic amendment. So, and she's actually been working on some of the COVID research during this pandemic. The wonderful thing about Marcia, who's a gentle and really lovely person, is when she works with our students and brings her cutting-edge research into the classroom to work with them, those kids will be experiencing medical research that has not yet even appeared in the medical journals. So they will be in advance even of the scientific community in terms of knowing about the research she's working on and she involves them in. Luca, you see in the lower left, is originally from Eastern Europe, has degrees in economics and experimental psychology, and has taught psychology and artificial intelligence for us and many other subjects. He's an absolutely brilliant and charismatic teacher. Abigail Branford, a world champion debater, a Rhodes Scholar from South Africa who has competed in international debate championships in Africa and in Europe and elsewhere, and is a very accomplished expert in the social sciences and in policy issues. These are the kinds of teachers who are in front of our students, people who are absolute masters of their subject, but also are passionate about them, and they model their passion for our students. If you show me the next slide, there are a few others of our teachers I've just picked out to put in front of you. And at the same time, on the left, I'll just pause to say, we're looking there at the dining hall of Pembroke College, built in the 1840s. You've noticed the Gothic architecture and the stained glass windows on a sunny day. That's where the students take their meals every day. And that grassy lawn you see in the foreground is the chapel quadrangle, as it's called. And this, of course, one of the magic codes in Oxford is what grass you can walk on and what grass you cannot. This quadrangle is a hangout space for kids. So in the morning or between their class meetings, or even sometimes their classes will come out and sit on the grass or have a coffee on the grass in order to discuss a subject. But this is a social center, if I can say that, where kids hang out at all hours of the day and into the evening. Of course, in late June and early July, it will be light until almost 10 o'clock in the evening. So it's lovely to be in this quadrangle and able to enjoy it as a space to think and talk and learn. Some of the teachers on the right, I'll just say quickly, I won't go into the details of all of them, but for example, Maximilian Lau, you see at the top, is an Oxford doctorate in medieval history, and he's an expert on war in world history. It's actually a course that he has developed for us. He's a senior research fellow in Oxford and also a professor in a university in Japan. He moves back and forth. He's been teaching with us for years. April Pierce, you see in the upper right, originally an American, trained at Boston College and NYU in philosophy, then a PhD in literature at Oxford. But on top of that, she's an award-winning poet and short story writer. She founded the Oxford Writers' House, and she has taught at Oxford University and is now a senior humanities teacher at the American School in London. She is a revered teacher who students rave about every time they have worked with her. I would tell you about all the others. I'll just pick out Daniel Marshall as somebody, again, an extraordinary person. He began his life as a policeman in England, and for 5 years was a British bobby. But he became involved in programs and issues around juvenile education and delinquency. He went back to university and did a PhD at Cambridge in criminology. He is now a professor in Liverpool, and he specializes in issues around social justice and around especially adolescents and young incarcerated people. He's, again, a charismatic teacher who, of course, has war stories from his times as a policeman, but has this big heart and generous, kind manner as he introduces students to the issues involved in criminology and criminal justice, both in the particulars of the approach of law enforcement, but also in theories of social justice and how legal systems form and how social mores bear on that subject. I'm very proud of these people, and I envy any students who get to study with them, because the experience is absolutely unforgettable. And I'd be happy anytime to talk more about faculty, but I should move on to talk a little bit about some of the other elements of the program. Here's a daily schedule. Again, on the left, you're looking at another shot of that great quadrangle in Pembroke College, where one doesn't want to sit on the grass, one can sit on the benches outside in the dining hall. Beautiful place to hang out. The daily schedule gives you an idea of what life is like. Of course, breakfast in the dining hall, those major classes from 9 to noon, and then a break and lunch and free time. Then in the afternoon, the 2-hour minor seminars. And of course, you'll be with a different group of students. You're going to spend a lot of time with your major student colleagues. A different set of kids will be in your minor, and you'll do a second subject. From 3 to 5 every afternoon, there will be different activities, including sports, workshops, other extracurricular activities, and they will be widely various. I mean, one might be for people wanting an introduction to art history, a walking tour in the Ashmolean Art Museum. It might be a tour group I take to see literary sites in Oxford, including the place where Shakespeare used to stay every time he visited Oxford on his way back to Stratford. Or it might be a fun run down on the Roger Bannister track. Today, the track at Oxford is named for Roger Bannister because it is the actual track where he broke the 4-minute mile barrier. And we can take students down and to have a fun run and a selfie or a photo op on the place where he accomplished that extraordinary human feat. Early dinner in the Pembroke Dining Hall, which you've seen already. And then there's some free time, maybe to work on projects, maybe to hang out and talk with friends, maybe to sit and read quietly. An evening meeting to get together and organize reflections and plans for the next day. And then in the evening, there'll be programming of all kinds, perhaps a theater visit, perhaps a guest speaker. And some of the guest speakers we have arranged are really extraordinary. We're going to have Flora Fraser, who's one of Britain's leading biographers and has written important biographies of many members of the royal family, including all 6 princess daughters of George III. She's coming up from London to see us. We're going to have Adam Smith, who is the director of the Rothermere American Institute, to talk about American history from a British or European point of view. We're going to have a panel of Rhodes Scholars. We're going to bring together 3 or 4 of the current Rhodes Scholars to sit and do an informal presentation so the students get a chance to find out what is a Rhodes Scholar and how do you become one and what does it mean, and really get a chance informally to connect with them and maybe to be inspired one day to pursue that dream for themselves. And of course, we're also going to arrange for admissions reps from St. Andrews and from University College London and from the LSE and other British colleges to come and do an informal open session with our students, letting them know about the degree opportunities either for junior year abroad or for bachelor's degrees or graduate degrees, but to open the horizon for students to learn about British universities and what those opportunities present. We won't waste any time of the hour of day or night, and kids can choose which of the activities or speakers they want to go and attend, or they can go quietly and do some writing, or some reading, or chat with their friends in the program. But that gives you a sense of the shape of daily life. I think we should move to the next, which will give us another sense of the life in Oxford. I want to say a word here about Oxford in terms of green spaces. We might think of it as a medieval town that has a lot of built up environment, and it is one of the most scenic and enjoyable medieval historic centers. But there is a lot of green space in Oxford too. I mentioned that kids will get to do some sports and get some exercise. Those who like to jog or walk, they're wonderful places. Across the street from Pembroke College are the Christchurch Meadows, which have been the same for 1,000 years. Gorgeous meadows in which there are English cattle, sometimes deer, and it's framed on two sides by the Thames River and the Charwell, where it's about exactly a mile and a quarter around the perimeter. So it's a perfect route for jogging or walking in the morning. It's a place that I absolutely love to be. The University Park's at the other end of town. Huge green expanse with beautiful walking paths and garden beds and cricket pitches and what is a rugby pitch or a touch football ground. And there are also places that are a little more idiosyncratic. I will take kids to have tea in a graveyard. Next to St. Mary's Church is a tiny medieval graveyard where they used to bury dignitaries right in the center of Oxford. And there's a tea shop in the church where one can take one's tea and brownies or cookies out and sit at tables or even sit on graves in that green space and enjoy a British tea while meditating on the meaning of life in all these times. I think the last shot will convey an important idea as well. If we move to the final slide, and that's our focus on students. I've mentioned the faculty as the absolutely essential human element here. The other, of course, is the students. And to attract the right student body, it's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. The students we attract come from all over the United States and indeed from other places abroad. They have many different backgrounds. They're in every kind of school, public, private, some are homeschooled. But the one thing that they have in common is that they see a summer program like this, which includes learning and challenge and international experience, as an absolute dream. And they say, yes, this is what I want to do. Instead of lying on a beach or going off to play tennis all summer, I want to be in Oxford. I want to be in front of those brilliant, inspiring teachers. I want to meet kids like myself who have those interests. So one of the things we find happening in the summer program in Oxford is that kids discover that there are many other students for whom learning is cool and exploring new subjects is really cool. And that can be a really uplifting and exciting time. I'll just close these remarks because we're going to answer some questions by saying that students come on a program like this for many reasons. Some of them are, trying to build a resume for college by demonstrating what they've studied and done. Some of them are exploring possible careers. Maybe they're exploring possible majors in college. Maybe they're building skills. They want to do writing or they want to do the kind of math and engineering work that a seminar like that would bring. Many of them may be looking to be in a college environment for the first time, or to live abroad for the first time, or even to be living away from home in a community like this. And of course, many kids are coming to discover something about themselves. What's it like to be in a college environment? Can I handle this kind of work? How do I respond to a new subject that I have known nothing about and throw myself into? But whatever the combination of motives that students bring, the results are truly magical. I've seen this happen for 30 years and more. It can be a transformative experience. My own grown children have been through this program and loved it in the sense of their experience of themselves and what is possible and their expansion, the expanding view of the horizons in the future. So I hope any of the students who are on this call will give it a serious thought about joining us this summer. I'll be there as director. I'm going to make it my mission not only to have serious conversations with lots of kids, but I want to take them in groups and small and even individuals to experience Oxford in the ways that I think I can show them are truly meaningful. So I'm going to pause and open it up for questions. Let's
Thank
talk.
you, Professor Basker. That was great. And I know Rebecca's going to hit us with questions. Before we do, maybe I should just say a word about COVID, because I suspect that that could be on people's minds. And I'll just be as succinct as I can. Putney actually ran a program last summer when everybody else was shutting down, for the reason that we were hearing from parents that, since March, and that was back in June, we had to make this call, students had been, as I mentioned earlier, isolated, missing the best and most important part of adolescence, which is face-to-face interaction with really exciting professors and people. So we actually ran a pre-college program right here in Vermont. Vermont had very low COVID rates. We had to invent pods. We had to invent how to keep everybody healthy, all the protocols. I won't bore you with all the details except to say it worked. We had 300 students, 50 faculty, for a month here in Vermont. Nobody got COVID. We were out in the field doing all the things you would do to be sensible. So if we could do it a year ago, we're confident we can do it this year. Now, what about Oxford? Jim can speak more about this, but Oxford is in person right now. When you think about Pembroke, it isn't like the American universities that have thousands of students. These are teeny little colleges. Pembroke can sleep, what is it, Jim, 300 and something people?
Yes, about 330 kids.
330 students. So if they have 330 beds, it's smaller than many summer camps in Vermont. So that gives us the ability to really develop the kind of pods and the kind of safety protocols, in addition to the fact that Oxford has very strict standards that we'll be adhering to. Having said that, if you look at the map right now, and who knows what's in the future, Great Britain is leading Western Europe in vaccinations right now. As you probably know, Boris Johnson is taking some criticism from other leaders in Europe about what they call his hoarding of the vaccines. The AstraZeneca vaccine was developed with the help of Oxford scientists and researchers, and he is leading for those reasons in having vaccines available to the people of Great Britain. So we're confident we're going to be in much better shape than we were last summer. We're confident that our protocols at Putney work. We're confident that the protocols at Oxford that are keeping their current faculty, staff, and students healthy work. And we're very optimistic about going forward. Now, the obvious question is, well, what if you're wrong? The answer is, because there is so much uncertainty, your deposit that accompanies your application, $700, which is refunded in full if you're not accepted, and otherwise it's obviously applied, as well as any payments, are refundable until April 15 of this year. That's unusual, but if you decide, listen, this isn't working for us, we're too anxious, we don't want to make this happen, we send back every single penny until April 15, when we all feel we'll have a better view of exactly what the protocols will be and where we're at. So that's that COVID update. And hopefully you don't have to dwell on that too much, but I didn't want to have that go unmentioned. It's obviously important and on people's minds. We're super optimistic. And I think what we found last summer, and we're certainly going to find this summer under the year of isolation from so many students, is now more than ever, this is going to be the most enthusiastic group of students and faculty that we've ever had, who can finally be together making the magic happen after what we've all been through together. So that's the COVID view. Thanks.
I'll chime into that, Peter, simply to say nobody's more eager than I am to get back to Oxford. This past summer was the first summer in more than 35 years that I have not been in Oxford and in Britain for the summer. And I'm really eager to get back next summer.
When I first reached out to Jim to talk about this fall, his first comment was, I'm in withdrawal. I can't go another summer. Anyway, questions, Rebecca, take it away.
Okay, so I think we should just touch on the fact that we do have a scholarship program through PODF that students can apply until March 15th on our website. At the bottom of the website, you'll see a link to our scholarship page, which the deadline is March 15th. So if you want to look into that, do so quickly, but the PODF scholarship can go towards the Oxford Academia program. So there was some scholarship questions. There's some questions about housing. Will the kids stay in single or double rooms?
Well, the housing is almost entirely single rooms. And it's on landings where you go up a staircase and there will be 2 or 3 rooms off one landing. Most of them have private bathrooms, what they call ensuite bathrooms. So the kids will be in singles, but they'll be living, in a building where there are other students on that floor or in that staircase.
All right, great. There's some questions about the enrollment process and the breakup of rising seniors versus rising juniors. So that kind of intertwines with having a rolling admissions, and that picture kind of develops as students enroll. Pete, do you want to touch on our admissions process?
I will, and then Jim can fill in the gaps. Listen, we're looking for motivated students. This is not for students who are flunking out of school and need some remedial help. So it is also not as tough as getting into Harvard, where I do some teaching, or Columbia, where Jim does some teaching. Having said that, what are we looking for? We're looking for students who are motivated, who are really excited about the program, and who really want to give a lot to it as well as take a lot from it. So, I think both Professor Basker and I have often said, if you're coming because your mom or dad says this is really a good idea, not such a great idea. If you're coming, if you're coming because you've decided you really want to dig in with access to faculty, guest speakers, and other students, not to mention a cultural world that we've never experienced in the United States, and that jazzes you up, you're probably a great applicant. So what's the process? You submit your application, you send a $700 deposit. We then tell you whether or not we have space, and you choose your seminar, sorry. We then tell you whether or not we have space in the program and whether or not we have space in your seminars. Assuming it's all a go, we then ask you to send us the emails of 2 teachers that know you well at school, and you have to write an essay about why you wish to do this. Normally, we would ask for a transcript, but because of the COVID world, the fact that faculty are under so much, your teachers are under so much pressure now doing Zoom and everything else, and your transcripts may well be affected by the weirdness of the way you've been learning for the last year, we're skipping the transcripts this year. So then once we get your references and your essay, we will tell you whether or not you're in. If you're not, we send back your $700 and say, hey, reapply next year. We don't think you're ready for this. If you are, it's a go, and we all go forward from there. So that's pretty simple summary. The important point to make here is, is there a perfect student for Oxford academia? Yes. Are they similar to each other? No. There will be jocks. There will be intellectuals. There will be nerds. There will be cool kids. There will be filmmakers. There will be writers. There will be scientists. There will be people there are people who don't really know what they're interested in, but they just want to try and figure it out. So there's no perfect model of what you should be to apply. What you will find is that this will be one of the closest group experiences you've ever had. It's not like school where you can sort of, have your little clique over here, and then maybe a slightly larger group that you hang with, and then the rest of the people you just sort of ignore. It's like you will get close to everybody in this small program in ways that does not happen when you have the security of mom and dad, home, your community, all that safety stuff, and you can kind of come and go as you please. So it's really a transformative experience, both academically and in terms of your personal growth, because of the students and faculty that are there. So I don't know, what did I miss, Jim?
Peter, I think you rang the bell, and I've been amidst these students for years and years and see all the things that you're talking about. One of the great things about a program like this is it gives a kid a chance to be outside the social framework of their school and really discover what they're genuinely interested in without peer pressure from whatever identity is theirs back at school. I've also seen some questions about what's the right grade level for kids. We get kids in every grade level here, including graduating seniors. So there are many kids who view this as something, their sophomore, junior year of high school, that is preparatory in some way. They're discovering what they want to major in college or prepare their application for college. There are younger kids who are polishing their skills for upper school. But we also have kids who in their senior year have a subject they really want to warm up on for college. So they're effectively graduated and they are admitted to college in many cases, or sometimes taking a gap year, but they want to throw themselves into a subject which they know they're going to pursue in university, and they want to get a running start on it. So kids come with different purposes and goals, but it works brilliantly for all of them. And needless to say, we don't have grade differentiations between 10th and 11th and 12th and so on. You're either in the high school program or the middle school, and commingled according to the interest in the subject.
And I guess we kind of evaded the question. Is like, is there a difference between 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th? Jim mentioned in the beginning, there's a big difference between middle school and high school. In other words, you run very separate programs, but within your unit of high school or middle school, you won't probably know at the end of the program who is a sophomore, who's a junior, who's a senior. At school, it really matters. In this program, it really doesn't. And everyone's just one big family.
Great. There is a couple questions about how you dig into a seminar in just 2 weeks. How much are you able to really dig in and get a sort of a transformation experience in a short 2-week period?
Well, that is the goal of every good teacher I know of, whether in college or university or in high school or any other setting. Believe it or not, magic can happen not just in 2 weeks, but in 1 hour. I think we've all had the experience of a light going on in our heads because of a particular experience. When I orient the faculty, I talk with them about what their objective is in the class, and it is not to cover a particular curriculum or set of facts or whatever. I tell them that their duty, their objective is to make the kids more excited about the subject when they leave than they were when they came. I help them to figure out how to do that, but it doesn't have to do with how much you can pack into 2 weeks so much as it has to do with how many epiphanic sessions or experiences or exercises can you put kids through. So for example, I'll be doing a session with kids in the program around the question of how does the world change its mind? And in 1 hour, we're going to look at seminal writings from the anti-slavery movement over 200 or 300 years. And in 1 hour, we're going to begin to understand how it is that people change from a worldview that accepted slavery as a universal condition to one where no one believed slavery was legitimate. But how does that happen? And we're going to look at that with historical materials and in discussion and workshop. And in 90 minutes, I promise you, a new understanding going to roll out of it. That's the kind of teaching we're doing in every class.
That is a great segue. Can you address the question, why Oxford Academia over other similar programs?
I have one answer to that, or a two-part answer to that. The people. The teachers, I would defy anyone to find better teachers than these people. They are extraordinary to a person. They have taught for me before. Every one of the people I've introduced on this show have taught with me in programs in the past, and they have had powerful student responses. I'm also convinced that the students we'll attract to a program like this are exceptional. And frankly, that's the essence of any powerful experience, powerful educational experience. Anybody can be in a tour group and see the sights off a clipboard. But it's the human dimension of this program that I promise you is going to be as good as any program anywhere, better even.
Thanks. Pete, can you talk a little bit about our travel arrangements? There's some questions about if students can travel from the US over together.
Sure. So I just want to start by saying when my parents launched the first program, Jeff's and my parents, I should mention that this is a third generation organization. We're not some big corporation. We're educators sitting in this barn that I'm speaking to you from in Putney, Vermont. There's about 35 of us, including Rebecca, of really brilliant, great young people. I'm the old guy on the block, and that really make this magic happen. In when my parents first sent these programs out, as you might have seen in the second slide, they went by ship. There were no airplanes. Whether it's been by ship or by plane, we haven't lost anybody yet, and we're not planning to start this summer. So the answer is, once you're accepted, we will offer you flights from both New York and the West Coast that we will have our staff on. And we will either send you a rate that you can pay for that, or you can go book it yourself. We'll be letting you know that soon. When you get to the airport, we'll be there with a sign looking for you. We will get you to London. The minute you land in London in the COVID world, we'll get you right on a bus and take you right to Pembroke College. And then the minute that you take off, you're in the family. In other words, we treat you like we would treat one of our own kids that we love, that we don't want to lose. So long and short of it is, we will leave nothing to your imagination, not only about travel, but what to bring, how to bring it, right down to the number of pair of socks and underwear. And we have been doing this a long time. We've got this one figured out. So if you have individual questions, feel free to call me or anyone here at Putney anytime, but we will not leave anything to your imagination in terms of logistics, including flights.
That's great. Pete, you might be able to segue that right into, or James, perhaps you, chaperones and supervision, curfews and dorms, are they co-ed?
I'm happy to speak to it. Of course, the dorms are fundamentally co-ed, but in single rooms with private bathrooms. So the 60s were over long ago, so there are no shared co-ed bathing facilities, but there are boys and girls. We tend to have them organized by sex on different staircases, so that we do have a certain degree of separation. But of course, the kids are free to socialize in the dining hall and on the second quad. There are residential staff who are responsible in a pastoral way for the well-being of the kids who live in the residence with the students, and there will be an adult on every staircase. So there's someone there in residence to make sure the kids are okay, to whom they can turn if they're sick or have a problem, if there's a fire drill, that kind of thing. The guidelines are as you would expect. Yes, there's a curfew for kids. It'll be slightly earlier for the middle school students than for the high school kids. The rules are, pretty much what you would expect in terms of decency and decorum. But of course, there's zero tolerance for alcohol or drugs in any student in any way connected with those. Will be leaving immediately. So I think it's the kind of community that parents will feel comfortable about. And by the way, I haven't discussed this with Peter, but I have said it to a lot of parents already. Parents are very welcome to visit. This is not a penal colony, or as one of my daughters was in a camp in Maine one summer years ago, only one summer because we didn't send her back, where they didn't allow parents to visit at all during the summer, which I found cruel and unusual. We don't take that view. Parents are very welcome to visit the program. If they do, they should probably come at the closing weekend rather than the beginning. But either way, I promise personally to give a walking tour of Oxford to any of the parents who come along to visit their kids in Oxford.
Absolutely. In
That's
fact,
great.
I'll subject you to one of my lectures and you'll have to stay for the whole thing.
They've been subjected to that for the past hour.
I've noticed.
One last question here, and it is about quarantine and COVID testing protocols before departure. And what does that look like for a Putney program?
So currently, it is that you have to get a PCR test. And once those results come in, you have to quarantine really religiously until you meet us at the airport. Then when we land, we test again, and we test 5 days in. Now, we don't know what the protocols will be by summertime. In other words, we're making some progress here, team. And as we vaccinate and as we get more vulnerable people protected, obviously things are going to change. So the answer is, what exactly will the protocols be in June and July? Can't tell you. We can tell you what we do now, and we can tell you that we've done it successfully. And we haven't missed yet. Now, I want to mention, it's not just the program this summer, but we are now currently sending college gap programs all over the world. We've had students in Iceland, in Croatia, we're off to Morocco shortly, here in the Northeast, throughout the globe, in places that we feel are safe and we can conduct the program safely. So we've been doing that successfully. We're very optimistic about this summer, and we'll know the exact protocols, closer to the time of departure. And we'll be very clear with you about those again.
So that is it for our questions. I want to thank everyone for all your questions and for joining us. And thank you, James and Peter, for walking us through this.
Yeah, and let me just say, first of all, thank you, Professor Basker. I learned things today that I didn't know, and I know I'll learn a lot more if I get to join you for a few days this summer. Call us. This is not some big impersonal organization. If you call the barn here in Vermont, you're going to get myself or other people on the phone that really know the program, are really dedicated to the quality of the program, and really want to help figure out whether this is the right choice for you. So feel free to give us a buzz anytime. We actually are old-fashioned. We prefer the telephone. You're welcome to email us, do all the other things you wish, but we can learn more about your student or you student if you call us, make sure it's a good match by talking to you than we can through the technology that just is a little less personal. So reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
And Peter, I'll just add to that while I'm not in Vermont, I am watching the snowfall here in New York, but I too am happy to answer questions if people put them to Putney, and they will be in touch with me with any questions that are the kind that I can answer. I'd be happy to do that. I'm not remote from the program either. And as I said, I'll be there in person in the summer. I look forward to meeting people then.
Great.
And I'll just close by the question that hasn't been answered, which is what about timing? It is a rolling admissions process, which means the first applicants that apply, we hold spaces for while we put you through admissions. So what does that mean? It means that a student when things get tight, which they do, that a student who applies after you, but whose teachers are more prompt, won't get your spot. If we confirm that we're holding you a spot pending admissions, we will hold that spot for you unless you're not accepted. So timing is important. This is a small program this year, and therefore, and Pembroke's a small college. So if this is something that you're excited about, get moving. Don't call up in May or June and say, hey, it was nice being on your webinar back there on February 18. I'm ready to act, because it'll be too late. Thanks.
Yeah, and with that being said, we do have the ability to, we have extended our refund to April 15th. So if you put down money now, you're at no possibility of losing that. But it does come into play with the seminar choices, because the seminars are smaller. So if you have a seminar you're really excited about, you want to get your space held right away.
Amen.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
Bye,
It's great to
everybody.
see you.
Bye-bye.